Hey everyone! Since bias is a quite a returning subject within this channel, I thought it might be a good idea to get into 5 of the more known biases out there. The definition of a bias itself is as follows. Cognitive biases are tendencies to think in a certain ways that can lead to systematic deviations from a standard of rationality or good judgment. Now this definition makes it seem like biases are ways to limit our own thinking and it's mostly a bad thing. In previous years, however, and now I'm not actually talking about years, I'm not talking about centuries, but in previous centuries a bias like this was our survival instinct and was very effective. When we encountered a bear in the wild, we would immediately jump to the knowledge of previous experiences saying that these animals will probably tear it to shreds and the best solution right now is to run. Never even imagining the possibility that the bear might be a friendly domesticated one only wanting to give hugs and lots of love. Because if it isn't the case, you'd fall victim to Darwin's natural selection. That being said, since we aren't running from bears as often as we used to anymore, it's time to slightly adapt our way of thinking to match our current environment. The first bias we get into is the availability bias. The availability bias is when people overestimate the importance of information that is available to them. This bias is mostly based upon examples of real-life experiences which you deem to give a good representation of the reality. The most given example of this is about smoking. A person might argue that smoking is not unhealthy at all because they know someone who lived to be 100 years old and smoked excessively. Therefore, they conclude that smoking isn't as bad as it made out to be, even though research suggests otherwise. The second bias is the ostrich effect, the ostrich bias, and this effect is basically the little kid in elementary school who puts his hand on his or her ears and starts shouting very loudly, "I can't hear you, la 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 la." It's refusing to listen to information that might threaten your worldview, like for example information about your favorite political leader that might make you lose respect or admirability, and therefore, like an ostrich, you just bury your head in the sand and refuse to listen, which is mainly to protect yourself. The third bias we get into is the confirmation bias. Now this bias is a bias that I myself am fairly guilty of as well, and I think most of us actually are. We love to agree with people who agree with us. It's why we only visit websites that express our political opinions and why we mostly hang around people who hold similar views and tastes. We tend to be put off by individuals, groups and news sources that makes us feel uncomfortable or insecure about our views. This is what's known in psychology as cognitive dissonance, and it's the preferential mode of behavior that leads to the confirmation bias, the often unconscious act of referencing only those perspectives that fuel our pre-existing views, while at the same time ignoring or dismissing opinions, no matter how valid, that threaten our worldviews. Now the fourth bias we get into is the anchoring effect, also known as the relativity trap. This is the tendency we have to compare and contrast only a limited set of items. It's called the anchoring effect because we tend to fixate on a value or number that in turn gets compared to everything else. The classic example is an item at a store that's on sale. We tend to see and value the difference in price, but not the overall price itself. Let's for example say you see a nice t-shirt in the store which says sale, from 25 euros to 20. Now since you have a tendency to compare the price of 20 to the price of 25, you think wow that's cheap, 5 euros off. Even though you might walk down the street later and see the exact same shirt for 10 euros. Now the last bias on this list is the blind spot bias. Now I saved this one for last because what the blind spot bias is failing to recognize your own cognitive biases. This is a bias itself, talking about biasception, because once again it's hard to adjust your own worldviews, which is why we rather seek the fault in others instead of in yourself. This is however also a bias. Now these were only 5 of the most known biases within psychology. Of course there are a hell of a lot more, which we might get into in later videos, but this is it for now. Thanks a lot for watching, till next time and see ya!